this video, we're going to go over another method of solving a quadratic equation. Solving this quadratic equation also allows us to find the x-intercepts. To use this method, we need to get the equation in this form right here, where there is simply an x squared on one side and a constant on the other side. Once we get it in this form, by doing whatever we need to do, add, subtract, multiply, or divide, then we're able to take the square root of both sides to get our x-intercepts, or in other words, to get our solutions. Let's look at our first example. Our first example is already in this form. It's got x squared isolated by itself equal to a constant here on the end. Once I get it in this form of x squared being isolated and a constant on the end, I'm able to take the square root of both sides. Square root of x squared is simply x. We have to remember what the definition of the square root is, because most of the time people are going to think you're going to get one solution here. The square root of 9 is 3. The definition of the square root is writing down one of two numbers that are exactly the same that multiply together to get this number. Well, 3 times 3 is 9. That's one of my answers. But there are two other numbers that are exactly the same that multiply together to give you 9. Those two numbers are -3 and -3. So here are my two solutions. When I take the square root of a constant, I'm going to get a positive solution and a negative solution. We're going to solve this one using the square root method. Unlike the other one, the x squared is not isolated. That's the only thing that should be on this side of the equal sign. That means I need to get rid of this -36. I'm going to use my normal rules for solving an equation, and that means do the opposite to both sides. And I'm going to get x squared is equal to 36. Once it's in this form, once it's in this order, I can now take the square root of both sides. The square root of x squared, remember I need to find pairs. I'm going to write down one of them. Same thing here. What two numbers are exactly the same that multiply together to give me 36? That will be 6 and -6. Our next example, we're going to use the square root method to find the solutions to this quadratic. Again, this x squared, to use this method, needs to be isolated, needs to be by itself. So the first thing I'm going to do is add 75 to both sides. I want to bring down my 3x squared. This cancels out, is equal to 75. This x squared is still not isolated. I need to get rid of this 3. Just like any equation, to get rid of a number, you have to do the opposite. I'm multiplying 3 and x squared. The opposite of multiplying is dividing. I need to divide both sides by 3. I'm going to get x squared is equal to 25. Now that the x squared is completely isolated, I can now take the square root of both sides. X is equal to, what two numbers are exactly the same that multiply together to give me 25? That would be 5 and -5. I'm going to use the square root method for this problem. Again, this x squared needs to be isolated. I need to do my adding and subtracting first before I do my multiplying and dividing in getting this x squared isolated. That means I need to get rid of this -64. The opposite of -64 is +64. I'm going to add 64 to both sides. I'm going to bring down my 100x squared. This cancels out. Bring down my equal sign. 0 plus 64 is 64. I need to get rid of this 100 to isolate this x squared. I'm multiplying 100 and x squared. The opposite of multiplying by 100 is dividing by 100. These 100s cancel out, X squared is equal to 64 over 100. Once I isolate this x squared, I am now ready to take the square root of both sides. X is equal to take the square root of a fraction, I simply take the square root of the top number and then take the square root of the bottom number. What two numbers are exactly the same that multiply together to give me 64? That would be 8 and negative 8. What two numbers are exactly the same that multiply together to give me 100? That will be 10 and negative 10. Once I get my fractions as answers, because you can get fractions as answers, remember you should always put a fraction in lowest terms. What number will go into 8 and 10? That will be 2. Divide both of those by 2. 8 divided by 2 is 4. 10 divided by 2 is 5. And divide both of these by 2, negative for this. So on these I should get a positive answer and a negative answer. Now using the square root method, you can determine how many solutions a quadratic has. The number of solutions is going to tell you or give you an idea of where the quadratic is going to be located when you go to graph it. If the x squared is equal to a positive number, then you're going to have two real solutions. That means the graph of the quadratic will look something like this. I have two real solutions. If I have x squared is equal to a negative number, I have no real solutions. That means the graph is going to look something like this. Look, it does not intersect the x-axis. There are no real solutions for this one. If x squared is equal to 0, then I'm only going to have one real solution. That means the graph is going to look something like this. It's only going to intersect the x-axis at one spot. So if it says x squared is equal to a positive number, once you isolate the x squared, that means there's going to be two real solutions, two x-intercepts. If it's equal to a negative number, no x-intercepts. If x squared is equal to 0, one x-intercept at 0. So what they'll do is they'll give you equations and they'll ask how many solutions does this have? And you're going to use these rules right here. X squared is equal to 64. X squared is equal to 64. How many solutions does this have? Since 64 is positive, this is going to have two real solutions. X squared is equal to 0. Once x squared is equal to 0, that means you're going to have a one real solution. That means it's going to look like this. X squared is equal to negative 100. Well, if you isolate the x squared is equal to, and you have a negative number over here on this end, there are no real solutions to this. So for this one, two real solutions because this is positive. This one, no real solutions because this number right here is negative. X squared is equal to 0. How many real solutions? One. This method only works when this x squared is isolated. So make sure you isolate that x squared before you apply this rule.